Okay, gonna kick the presentation off with a short movie about Tideway. If the laptop works.
I hate to break it to you, but everything we eat has to go somewhere. Yeah, I'm talking about poo. The average person has to go what? Like 365 times a year? That adds up to around 140 kilos of poo, which is more than double what I weigh, and that's just one person. Every day, London's sewer system has to deal with 1.25 billion kilos of poo. Most of this sewage gets treated at places like this. But there's a problem. The sewer system beneath our feet was designed when our city had a population of 2 million people. I mean, that's still quite a lot, but nothing compared to now. So when it rains, the system overflows, which is not good. If you imagine 8 billion toilets flushing straight into the Thames, that's how much ends up in the river every year. It's disgusting. And it's happening right now, right under our noses. Like here, at Blackfriars Bridge, where sewage can pour into the river at a rate of 50,000 kilos a second. It's just plain wrong. I mean, come on! London's one of the most impressive cities in the world, so you think someone would be doing something about this? And someone is. The Thames Tideway tunnel is going to be 16 miles long and take 7 years to build. It's massive. But when it's done, it'll take your poo directly to the sewage works and keep it out of the river for the next 100 years or so. Which means a cleaner environment for all of us, including the fish. And as London keeps getting bigger, we'll be protected, which is good. Because we're the ones who have to live here!
Everyone still hungry? I am. Okay, quick intro about myself. Got a bit of a mixed background, which always sounds a little bit shady. But I grew up on large projects. My father was an engineer and dragged my brother and myself to the various projects that he was working on. And I kind of cut my teeth on the Jubilee Line extension project. And I had no idea, to be honest, as an 18-year-old, what I was getting involved in. However, when they started digging out Canary Wharf and, you know, a bit of a geek, so getting to ride one of the first Jubilee Line trains out to Stratford, I kind of fell in love with projects. However, following my education, I was repeatedly told, well, projects aren't really cool, you know. You need to be a consultant, you need to be a banker, you need to be a financier, a legal person, etc. So sure enough, young impressionable guy, they told me that's where the money was, so I followed the money. I did a degree in business and French. The French bit was because I fancied my French teacher, and I just got into French. Spent a year in France in '98 with the World Cup, great kind of golden year. Then worked in industry again, planning. Dad taught me Primavera. Took a year in industry, and then was lucky enough to win a scholarship to do information systems at LSE. And trust me, no one at LSE was going into major programs, and I followed. So I went into banking and finance, and my first real job was on a grad scheme setting up pension systems. And I, fell in love with products and was very lucky to be a part of a team to develop the first ever kind of web system where we can go on and manage our pension funds online. And I was lucky enough to work for a great company. Left there and joined a tech startup that did anti-money laundering and fraud software. It was following 9/11, the Patriot Act and proceeds of crime, and the clear kind of link between money laundering and terrorism. And it was one of those crazy startups, started by a couple of very clever guys, but totally out of control, but a lot of fun. Sure enough, the company was bought out, and I had this yearning to get back into infrastructure and, you know, proper tangible projects, and was fortunate enough to get an opportunity to join Parsons Brinckoff at the time and implement a controls system to manage the PPP contract, which is when London Underground outsourced the capital works to Metronet and Tube Lines. And we leveraged that PPP contract, and fortunately worked with people that had the foresight that knew that scale of private financing requires really good controls. And there's actually a few people in the crowd today that I embarked on that project on, and we put in place something called the Master Projects Database, which again didn't realise, but was well ahead of its time. A web portal, web Gantt charts, 650 schedules with validation before the schedule hits the system, and value modules, milestone modules, etc. And that was great, and I finally ended up joining TfL as a permanent member of staff. A very exciting period for the organisation with the 2012 Olympics. I attended the presentation earlier about the Los Angeles capital works and the scale of works that need to be complete to support their Olympics, and see a lot of analogies, but being part of TfL through that Olympic process and almost going home back to London Underground and back to TfL, was incredibly proud of how the organisation didn't fail and how we delivered the key works to make and be a key part of why London 2012 was such a success. As is the way, you get a little bit, I've been here a while now, what's next? And the opportunity came to actually do a peer review of Tideway, which I completed with Steve Elliott, who was heading up controls on Crossrail. And sure enough, we did the review. If anyone knows Steve Elliott, he was pretty blunt in his findings, and I was a little bit more diplomatic, but it was fun. We went in, we did a quick deep dive. One thing led to another, and sure enough, called for a coffee and joined Tideway 4 and a bit years ago. So, now going to give you a bit of an overview on Tideway, what it is, showing you the kind of video clip. Hopefully I've convinced you of the requirement for something to happen in London, but I just want to touch upon some of the history that's kind of led to where we are today, and then finish off by talking about how controls have played a key role in achieving where we are today. Okay, a bit about the legacy. So, London in the 1800s was a very, very smelly place. There's even an entire book about how smelly it was and the impact that the lack of sanitary and lack of a sewerage system had. To put it in context, it got so bad that during a particularly hot summer in the 1800s, the stench was so bad and the number of mortalities from things like cholera was so bad that the government decided that they couldn't work in those conditions and moved from the Houses of Parliament to Oxford. They also, this was really the catalyst to do something about it, and they engaged a fantastic Victorian engineer, Sir Joseph Bazalgette, who's very much our hero on Tideway, to go ahead and fix this problem. So before we talk about how he fixed it, it's important to think about the landscape of London. And you know, I'm a Londoner. I live on the River Thames, and before starting Tideway, I was blissfully unaware that under London is an entire network of rivers, which we now call the Lost Rivers. Through urbanisation, these rivers have been built upon. They're still actually flowing under the ground. You can even go on a tour where you listen to manholes and you say, yeah, okay, that's the Fleet, that's Neckinger. Simon, I'm going to get you that for Christmas, maybe. And but the problem was this river network, they were basically open toilets. There's no system as we know today. So these open networks were carrying disease, and there's some absolutely horrific stats about infant mortality and a number of deaths related to diseases such as cholera. And guess what? Life expectancy was very low. Not purely because of this, but it's a significant factor in London. So Bazalgette commissioned. It was the kind of golden age of Victorian engineers, and off he went. And believe it or not, this system is still the backbone, and in effect the system in use today in London. I think it's something like 1,100 miles of brick-built tunnels. A lot of resources brought over from places like Ireland. I'm London Irish, and the Irish are famous tunnellers. They used to call them the mix with the picks. And so a lot of resources brought over, and a huge, ambitious scheme embarked upon. So just to try and touch upon some of the reasons for our kind of respect for Bazalgette. At the time of embarking on this project, there was approximately 2 million people in London, but he had the foresight to develop a system with the capacity to double that population. I guess the real obvious challenge is, well, that population is now roughly 8 million, and guess what? The projections are it goes up and up and up and up. And if anyone travelled by tube here today, you can see the infrastructure and Victorian network creaking at the seams to keep up with the pace of people moving and working in London. Also, a key feature of the system was that if the system filled up and in effect needed to discharge, rather than discharging into the roads and contributing to these health epidemics, it would discharge into the river. And unfortunately, that's what it does on almost a weekly basis as we stand here today. And some frightening statistics about the amount of raw sewage that's going and being discharged into that Thames. So that's that's the burning platform for us. Of course, it helps that without getting into a Brexit debate, we have a European directive on clean water, and if we don't fix this problem, the UK will be fined significant amounts by the European Union. Hopefully that's not something that kind of legislation is not something that will go away in the future. So finding a solution, how are we going to tackle this monumental problem in a busy city like London? Basically there's three main component parts to the solution. Firstly, you need to upgrade the sewage works, and again, it's having visited these works, predominantly in the east of London, they're almost cathedral-like in their appearance. I mean, they were spec to the hilt, and you almost think you're going into a church, and then the smell hits you, right? So, but the the engineering and the kind of finished product is quite a spectacle. So a huge programme of sewage work upgrades has been embarked upon. The Lead Tunnel, so in the east of London, this is one of the most kind of offending CSOs, which is the discharge area. And we've got Paul Tucker here today that was controls on the Lead Tunnel. And yeah, it's significant, a massive project in its own right, the biggest project Thames Water have ever done. And you know, I was fortunate enough to visit the Lead Tunnel prior to commissioning and just seeing the scale of some of the civil engineering and drop shafts, etc. It was fantastic, and so that's largely complete. And obviously, I'm here today to talk about the Thames Tideway Tunnel, the final piece of the puzzle, if you like. Okay, just to again illustrate the extent of these outfalls and the extent of the raw sewage. This is some modelling that's completed of the amount of discharge of this sewage into the Thames. And you may think, okay, well, you guys are going to fix it. We are going to fix it. However, there will be certain weather events that will lead to minor discharges. And in essence, the business case to totally eradicate any discharge in the future was not something anyone was willing to bite off. This is relatively small and something like a big tidal river like the Thames can handle. Okay, so in terms of our programme, that's our route in effect. So if we take it from the west, we start at Acton storm tanks, we then come into the river, and we in effect follow the river right through central London and then come out into the east of London where the sewerage works are. Just to give you some stats, and this kind of follows on nicely from the Lower Thames crossing presentation, a very long tunnel for central London, 25 kilometres. The tunnel's on a gradient, basically from west to east, which means it's self-cleansing, and that's, you know, how the sewerage and water gets to the east and gets to the waterworks. And it's a 7.2 metre diameter tunnel. All the project teams are very excited at the moment because they're going out to various parts of the world and looking at these TBM factories and getting that picture in front of the TBMs. And we're looking forward to greeting our TBMs and welcoming them onto site in the new year. We'll bring in most of the components by river, which is going to be a massive challenge. These machines are huge, something in the region of 200 metres fully assembled. And you can imagine a 7.2 metre cutter head on a barge through central London is going to be quite a spectacle. So touch upon some of the engineering challenges. Tunnelling through London, so you know there's been lots of it. The conditions. The conditions vary depending on the location in London. Obviously in the west you've got that really nice London clay. It's almost like if you've got Play-Doh or plasticine, if you push your finger in, it kind of keeps form. And very roughly speaking, the further east you get, it becomes slightly more complicated and challenging. However, we clearly have some great experience worldwide and great experience in London tunnelling, and we'll leverage all of those experiences and learnings to ensure we deliver the job. One of the things that really strikes you about Tideway is, wow, you're going under the Thames, past MI6, past Houses of Parliament, past the London Eye, and it's pretty high-profile stuff. and challenging. You know, it's this very congested landscape, and you know, I touched upon previously, and Ian gave a bit of a quiz about a number of bridges and tunnels and stuff like that. Again, I was kind of shocked being a Londoner. I thought I knew London, and it was like 75 bridges. You know, if that came up in a pub quiz, I'm out. There's a lot of bridges. Underground, subterranean is extremely congested. Obviously, you've got the tube. You know where that runs. But unfortunately, you find surprises. You don't always know where utilities are, gas, electric. You're also never quite sure what you're going to find when you start digging in the foreshore. To date, we've managed to evacuate part of central London following the discovery of an unexploded bomb from World War II. So that closed a few bridges down, such as Westminster, and obviously we have the plans in place to deal with this. However, it is a challenge. You know, it's a very old river with a lot of history. I'm based at Kirtling Street in Battersea, right next to the Northern Line extension. And just last week we dug up a barrel from 1830 in perfect condition. And guess what? Stop digging. The guys with the toothbrushes are here. The British Museum's here, and myself and my contractor, who's right in front of me today, Sergio from Flow. We're kind of like, yeah, it's a great barrel. To get it to the museum, we need to keep going. But it's part of the excitement and part of the beauty of what we're doing, to be honest. Just a little kind of screenshot from a model. This is Victoria Embankment, and I just included this just to touch upon some of those challenges. So we're very close to high-profile tourist destinations such as London Eye. We're pretty close to the tube network, and we're very close in some cases to some very strategic utilities infrastructure. And so all of that's a challenge. And I guess, you know, going out to Lee Tunnel in East London on a Thames kind of fenced off site, I remember travelling back to the office and thinking, well, I wish we had, you know, a fenced off site without the stakeholders, and you know, we could just crack on and do our big drop shafts, and it's a totally different beast. So and a massive challenge. So Ian, for those that were here, talked about the development consent order process. You know, how you get planning and approval to do these big schemes. And yeah, so when I joined, we were right in the heart of several key activities, including, you know, probably most importantly the consent process to get approval to go ahead and do the scheme. Naturally, you have different stakeholders with different views on life. I would say that we definitely benefited from that burning platform, as I described. You know, it's kind of hard to argue against the case. I might be biased, but you know, this level of pollution, it was never sustainable. So we benefited from the stakeholders, you know, driving forward and knowing that something had to happen. I guess the art is everybody's got a slightly different view on how to approach it, etc. And I'll touch upon that in a little bit. So that was our submission to the Planning Inspectorate. That was 130,000 pages. Every page scrutinised by multiple stakeholders. Believe it or not, when we submitted, there was a requirement for hard copy. So we had vans, day of release, vans, you know, queued up round a block, loading up the vans, and off they went and delivered in hard format the DCO. So one of our legacies, it may sound silly, but this is the last one, obviously, to be submitted in that format. Big schemes going forward, it's, you know, is a USB stick and save the forests kind of approach. But massive challenge. So what's the vision for Tideway? It's clearly a program. It's a nationally significant program, and you know we want to leave a legacy. So it's an environmental project. I'm very proud of the environmental benefits. I'm a fisherman. I like to go out on the Thames, and I don't like to see dead fish and all sorts floating past. We absolutely have to move forward and fix that problem and improve the environment. Health and safety. Again, I think we've got a very innovative approach to health and safety. There's been a huge investment from the Tideway client on this. There's something called the Employers Induction Centre, and that's a full day for anyone involved in the programme. It uses a real life scenario, it uses actors. It's a very hard hitting and shocking message, but it works, and that's kind of the beginning for us. So how do we transform that into not losing lives and not affecting any of our stakeholders? That's what we're embarking on now as we mobilise and get into heavy civils. But client's been fantastic in driving that forward. Clearly, economic benefits, massive scheme, £4.2 billion, kind of central London. I think over 4,000 people will work on a job, and clearly a key part in the economy of London. And I would say as well, we fell at a bit of a sweet spot in the market. So Crossrail, tunnelling, finishing off, us starting going. So guess what? All of the supply chain, a lot of resources, a lot of expertise that they need to mobilise and get going. Let's touch on people and in place. Again, because London's so congested, we will in effect be reclaiming some of the foreshore and some of the parts of the river, and 3 acres of new foreshore will be there as a result of the project, and we clearly have a commitment to turn that area into an attractive area for Londoners and its visitors. So let's talk a little bit about the timetable. So construction commenced in 2016. Next year is a big year, obviously, heading into tunnelling, mobilising the 24 sites we have, and very much getting on with it. Tunnelling forecast to end 21. I always find these slides slightly dangerous. And system commissioning in 2022. Sergio, yeah? Yeah, cool. Got that on camera. Again, just a bit of a visual representation in terms of some of the tangible things we're doing. Start right in the middle with the health and safety. Our CEO is Andy Mitchell from Crossrail. He's absolutely committed to, for example, avoid lorry deaths with cyclists or pedestrians. There's been a lot more of those than there have the one fatality in a tunnel across Crossrail. So again, the employer has very much been driving forward some of these initiatives, and then clearly working with the contractor base who are doing this all around the world to really make a step change. And that's what it might look like. These artists get carried away sometimes, but that's the vision. Okay, so I kind of submitted my slides to Anil, who organised this event, and he said, yeah, Tideway, what about the controls? So in the last 15 minutes, we'll do the controls, and hopefully leave a bit for questions as well. So what has controls to do with Tideway and what we're doing? I'm biased, but I think everything. So we had the pressure for change, that unforgettable image of toilets on the Thames. CH were engaged right from day one to search for the solution and do the optioneering. various options were on the table. We finalised on, to be frank, what seemed the only sensible option, the interception. That led to our super sewer and our business case. And guess what? All through that process and all through the planning process, the early deployment of controls and a program management approach to a complex task. Somebody mentioned earlier, if you put that in from day one, then guess what? You're in pretty good shape. If you put that in at 40%, it's really hard. And if you try and put it in later, you may as well forget it. So all of this took, frustratingly, 10 years, as is large infrastructure in London. So I want to touch upon the delivery model, because that's intrinsically linked to the solution, and for me it kind of illustrates the importance of controls as well. So CH engaged from day one, bringing big program expertise. At that stage it was, you'd walk in and every other person would be a London 2012 Olympics person. And I think probably if you go into Lower Thames Crossing now, they're probably sick, it's the other way around, they're sick of the Tideway factor. But that's the way of big jobs. This is the critical bit of this really, is so massive, we heard about the scale of Lower Thames Crossing to highways. Again, Thames Water aren't used to doing a £4.2 billion mega programme, and nor have an appetite, to be frank, to take that on. So working with Thames and the various stakeholders and government and the regulator, Ofwat, etc., we quickly decided on the model where we would set up an infrastructure provider. We'd raise private finance to fund the programme, and we'd go out to the City of London and to the market and look for potential investors. And the golden bit really was that we would work with government to have what's called a government support package, which would, limit the liability of potential investors. So there's a kind of step in if it all goes horribly wrong and we drop a TBM off a barge or a tunnel boring machine gets stuck, etc. And so basically what you had is all these multiple streams running in parallel. You've got to get consent, you've got to do the early design, you've got to do the early surveys. You've also got to go out and generate the money for this, and lots of multiple streams, all interdependent. Guess what? You need controls. So obviously you had to invest in getting the program going, and things like land packages for our major sites, and also to be frank, an army of lawyers to help get this through government, get this approved, and get this infrastructure provider set up. And so Thames invested and are still investing 1.1 billion, and the private finance is 3.1 billion. And the momentous day was 24th of August 2015, where we got the development consent order and approval to go ahead and do this. And that day, some of us, it was one of those project milestones where the top guy says, guys, you don't get many days like this, go to the pub. And I'll never forget my lead planner, I was like, where's Dave? He was, oh, he went, he's gone. He's there celebrating, and it was a massive effort to get that. So who's going to invest this huge amount of money, and who owns Tideway? Well, it's Bazalgette Tunnel Limited. So I was involved in the process to raise the private finance, and it was a weird and wonderful process. Obviously, very strict restrictions on the release of data, lots of weird anonymous meetings with groups that had code names, and it was a great thing to be involved in. But one thing that we were absolutely clear on is, these guys are going to scrutinise this program and this baseline to death. And sure enough, they did. And fortunately, we were on the back of several years of Ofwat, the regulator, Treasury, central government. Sometimes felt like every man and his dog coming in to scrutinise the program, and And, you know, that's where myself and my team would come to the fore, and we'd have to walk them through it, we'd have to justify it. We'd also have to tell them about the potential benefits and opportunities in the programme. And I think that was a fairly brutal process, but it put us in a very good place to then finally get consent, award the contracts, and get going, which will be tested and is being tested, but we feel like we've got the toolkit and the people to handle that. So again, heavily involved in the procurement process. It's a fairly simple compared to the Crossrails of the world. There's in effect 3 main JVs split on a geographical basis. There's also the systems integrator, and having been involved in railway systems predominantly, in my experience, I keep promoting it. Don't forget about the system integrator. It's not as complex, obviously, as a kind of a moving block railway signalling system, but please don't forget them. You know, history tells us that bit and the commissioning bit is a challenge. So the need for project controls. I think I've got 9 minutes left. You know, I don't know about you guys, but I spent a large part of my life promoting project controls and what it brings to organisations. And you kind of have to bite your lip sometimes, because for us it may be perfectly obvious, but for others it's a real sales pitch, and it's a big investment. But it's also a fairly new thing, and it's got a bit of a mystique around it. And I guess, you know, if I did a poll asking 100 people what project controls is, I'd probably get at least 70 variants of an answer. So obviously it's the good old time, cost, risk, and scope. A lot of the big program learnings is very much focused on that upfront scope piece, and you know, these blue books, these yellow books, these very tightly controlled books of scope that are kind of like the Bible, and you need to maintain that integrity and keep that up to date. And guess what? Through raising the finance, they were very much, you know, well, how are you going to stay in control, and how will you know when or foresee problems coming, and obviously you need to put the framework in place, and then learn from all of the previous jobs and the big kind of nightmare jobs as well, and you know, have the toolkit and have the people to deal with that. Oops. So just to keep life interesting, when we kicked off, our CEO and the Tideway client, so you know, people may have thought we were heading into this early contractor involvement, this kind of get to know each other, have dinner with Sergio and a few beers, and you know, put the foundations in for the job and value engineer. But right from the outset, Andy Mitchell laid down the challenge. He said, look, we can beat this program, and his challenge was to look at a program and try and take 2 years off, and you know, try and start your tunnelling 6 months early, and you know, take 6 months off the end, and then we'll find another year in the middle. And that's a massive challenge on a complex job. But so we embarked on that. We all went through this kind of change curve and a series of emotions, and we got on with it. And as brutal and sometimes painful as it was, we started early, we found problems early, we mitigated things early, and we wouldn't be where we are today if we had sat on our hands and kind of waited. So obviously, I touched upon this already, is just the kind of controls cornerstone. Again, very, very strict adoption of this throughout, right from the very early phases. I can remember my first day in 2013, and my first meeting, it was around a program. It was around the critical path. It had all of the senior leadership. And I was like, wow, these guys get it. You know, normally we don't talk about this stuff until a bit later. And in terms of some of the key aspects to enable that, again, you know, Andy Mitchell, way back in the day, was a planner. Our COO, Mark Sneesby, he was a planner. Our program director was fresh off the Olympics. He gets it. So it wasn't, for the first time in my career, it was like, these guys were pulling for controls and pulling for this information, and it was just part of the DNA of the project team. So I want to touch upon the program focus that we've put into Tideway. You know, we've leveraged some of these cool new tools on the market, things like Acumen Fuse. We wrote that into our contracts, so you know it's a requirement that as part of the monthly Clause 32 program submission, you need to run it against a tool, you need to achieve a certain score, and then when we actually talk about the program, we're talking about the real issues, not about relationships and mandatory constraints and the technical stuff that can frustrate. To be frank, the private money and the stakeholders demanded this kind of scrutiny and this quality information. Gamification is, you know, we're an alliance. There's a healthy competitive spirit in that alliance. We're all proud professionals and we all push each other. So I think there's big potential for leveraging that a little bit more, and certainly some of the tools on the market are leading us down that route. So this probably looks a bit scary, and probably even scarier depending on how far back you are. But we have an alliance. Thames are in the alliance, and all the contractors and in the alliance, and we generate this on a monthly basis, and it's using a tool called Tylos, time chainage. It's perfect for these kind of linear, repetitive jobs like tunnelling, and yeah, oh, it's gone. Must be lunch, right? And yeah, it's amazing to get the alliance and the project directors of the JVs and you know Andy Mitchell and every. It's just an example of how you can portray a lot of very complex information in one A3 sheet that our execs can digest. We have had to train them a bit on it, but they got there. Okay, just getting conscious of time. One thing that I've been kind of obsessive about is project controls, kind of fairly new thing still. A lot of variability in terms of maturity in the market of people's skills. We have to be mindful that we're a stand-up company. We're not a Network Rail or a Highways England with a long pipeline of work. This is stood up to deliver this job and then it's demobilised. But we've invested and been pretty obsessive about the recruitment process, making sure we get the best in the market. We invest in those people. Andy Mitchell is a great CEO, and it's very much about, you know, he's well aware of the competition we have with HS2s and lower Thames crossings and Crossrail 2s. So he wants to do something a little bit different, and I guess that the kind of private model enables that. So, you know, we don't always get it right, but we try and invest in our people and make people proud to work on the Tideway programme. Rotate roles. Don't sit in an ivory tower all your life. If you're in delivery, don't bitch and moan about the ivory tower. Check it out. It's very healthy to rotate roles both within the functions of controls, planning, risk, cost, etc., but also within the organisation, and also I would say between the kind of the contractor, the consultant, the client, etc. All different perspectives, but all a very healthy experience. A lot of the tools we have, to be frank, you know, if I put a 10,000 activity, not that I've got 10,000 actually, if I put 1,000 activity Gantt chart on the wall, it scares me, and guess what, it scares the life out of the project team. So we invest and we look at other industries to see ideas of how we can embed that information. And so for example, one of my favourites was just a project poster that an apprentice put together for me. You know, they'd bring something new and fresh. In this case, they put little Disney images, and there was a competition to how many are there. Well, it got people reading it at least. I'm not allowed to have Disney images anymore, but never mind. In terms of toolkit, I can talk outside of this presentation about it. You'll probably recognise a lot of the tools of the trade. Ecosys is an interesting one, not a huge presence in Europe, but a great tool. And obviously there's a lot of Prism clients and Cobra clients, so it'll be interesting to see how Ecosys plays out in Europe. Very early on, I convinced the client to invest in a data warehouse. That's up and running, and funny enough, it's a guy that worked for me at London Underground that's pulling that together. I would say that the real use will come in the kind of 20 to 80%, where we've got daily quants, for example. But it's a great tool, and it's an agile tool. So he's servicing areas such as legacy that I never thought we'd go there on this tool. It's very much a schedule, cost, risk tool. At the moment, the schedule, we're still just extracting direct from Primavera, but obviously we'll feed that into the system and then leverage the BI intelligence. Okay, and just some closing statements. You'll be cursing me at the back of the queue at a lunch. We've come a long way, and this is more a generic controls statement. Certainly from me starting on Jubilee line in the 90s, come an awful long way, but I think there's a world of opportunity. We heard from the keynotes, a lot of the mega programs aren't where they should be, given the scale of capital investment, and we need a bit of a step change. We don't compare favourably to other industries. Certainly my time in banking, for example, the sheer amount of data they turn out on a 15-minute cycle and provide intelligence for fraud alerts, for example, and then I struggle to import a P6 file. It just doesn't equate. We're getting a lot better, and obviously things like the cloud will be a great contributor to that. It's all about the people. How do you recruit the best people, or how do you grow the best people? How do you retain them? How do you attract the best people from universities and colleges and schools into this industry? It's a bit quirky and hasn't got a clear accreditation. So there's various steps forward there, but I don't think we're where we should be. And yeah, just to wrap up, I think there's a world of opportunity out there. There's unprecedented levels of capital investment, and I'm biased, but I feel we're in a great place, an exciting place as a profession. Lunch, questions, lunch. I'm going for the chicken burger, actually. Yeah. I'm mindful that we've run out of time, so it's probably best just to collar me, and I'm here all day. Thank you very much.